I went out to do this filming this weekend, and I wanted to get a haircut before we went, but couldn't get a chance to get in. We had the storm, and the kids were home from school. Everything was shut down, and I had to leave later in that day, and blah blah blah. And so I didn't get a haircut. So I finally got one. Feels good. It's amazing for a guy who has lost so much hair as I have that I can get shaggy and need a haircut.
That's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. It reminds me of my youth.
Absolutely.
Needing a haircut. So there it is, though.
And it probably is a lot cheaper than what mine does. My one is probably a lot more expensive than yours.
Mine costs me, I usually drop $20, $16 for the haircut, and I leave him a tip. His prices just went up. It's a little old barber, off of Main Street in town. Been going to him for years, and he was $13, and now I noticed today he was $16. So I give him a 20, and I say, "There you go, Carl." And
I wonder what I'm just trying to see what it is in if I convert it to yours, because my hair is just the cut and the dry alone. It's not bad. $78.
Oh, oof. Wow. Yeah.
That's just the cut. That's not the color and all that lot on stock.
What is that? About 45 to 50 pounds?
65 pounds.
65 pounds.
$78. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just the cut and blow dry, not the color.
Right. Oh, the color's totally different thing. If Rainey goes and gets color cut, all of that stuff, it's about $200.
Yeah.
So she hasn't colored her hair for 2 years. So
yeah,
she wants to do that. I said, go do it. Just let's get it done.
I cannot live without the blonde.
Yeah. Well, we go live in about 15 seconds, so we're going to go dark. I'll come and get you. Well, happy Tuesday evening, everyone. This is Scotty Roberts, and over there is my radio wife, Wendy Robertson. How you doing, Wendy?
How you doing? I'm doing well, thank you. Good
doing
to
better
see
now.
you, hubby.
I'm just so far so good, as I like to say. And so, everybody, welcome to our program, Robertson. And this is episode number 16.
Good number.
Yeah, it's a very good number. Mm-hmm. And I don't know numerology very well. When I was figuring out numerology at some point this afternoon.
That could have come out wrong.
Could have been very right, but it came out very wrong. And I was going through numerology this afternoon for a certain thing and adding up numbers and getting certain dates and wanting to line things up so it worked. So all I know is, let's see, 16 is 1 plus 6, which equals 7.
It's magic
7. 7 is supposed to be the number of perfection, is it
not?
not?
It's my numerology number as well. So
it's your what number?
It's my numerology number. I'm a 7. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah. What's it mean to you? What's 7 mean to you?
Well, 7 is the mystic and magical number. It's like the psychic number. So pretty much, it's pretty accurate actually. So yeah.
Well, that's good. I don't know what my number is. I thought I heard it was 5 once, but I might be mixing that up with something else.
Yeah.
I don't know how to figure. How do you figure your numeral?
So you add all your birth date together. You're like, so mine is the 16th of the 1st, 1970. So you add the 6 and the 1, and then the 1 and 1970, and then you get to a double number, and then you bring it into the single number. That's how you do it.
We're gonna have to talk about that sometime in the show, because I'd have to add all that up and figure it out and figure out what my number is.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in numerology and your life number and your love number and all that lot. Very
sure.
Big believer.
I'm a big believer. I don't know enough about it to say I really understand how it works, but there it is. By the way, I've got to turn on the comment section so I can see who all is here and what all is going on. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the program this week. Wendy and I would love to be doing it every day, but we have to. Boom. But I think we'd get worn out right now. So one of these days, I think, though, this will be a daily show. I'm predicting that. I see it in my head that this could be a daily show that we do.
Wow.
Because
I think they can cope with more of us, Scotty.
Yes. And so I want to thank everybody who comes here. Carlene, thanks for being here. Kat, good to see you over there. Chief Romeldi and Olympus, good to see you. Anita Palmer and Viking Off-Roading. You'll have to explain your moniker to us one of these days, Viking. And so it's good to see you here and those who are gathering. And so thanks for being here. And today, Wendy, we're going to talk about a topic that it's funny. We get all these topics and we get people that present us with topics. And then you and I start talking about what kind of topic we want to do. And it usually hits us, or it hits you. And you say, here is a really good topic. We ought to consider this. And I like that, because I'd be all over the board if it weren't for you keeping my feet nailed to the ground.
Well, you know me. I'm just a grounder. That's what I do.
You're a grounder. That's it. And so the topic today is, don't think we just pull these out of the air and that it's just weird stuff that we come up with. These are all things that either we have dealt with or we have in our various vocations where we used our counseling. We have seen these things over and over and over again, and they keep repeating. And they will repeat all throughout time. These are things that have happened to probably every couple in the history of mankind, all the way down through probably every couple that is yet to come. Now, I'm sure there are cultures where you're not allowed to feel these things. You're not allowed to speak about them. You're not allowed to counsel about them. There is no counsel for them. But for the most part, people who are married go through these things. People who are couples go through these things.
Yeah.
And now I'm not going to say anything about, I'm not lopping off the gay community or any of that. But mostly what we're talking about is stuff that applies to, you could say it's people who love each other or have a love for each other and they start a relationship.
Anyone in a relationship, really.
Yes, anyone in a relationship. And it doesn't have to be a marriage relationship. It can be a relationship where you have given yourself to another person and that person has given themselves to you, at least in an outward sense, or at least you believe that's what's gone on. And what is it, Wendy? I could state it, but I want you to state it. What is the big question that was on your mind when this topic, you posed a question to me? What happens when, and then you gave me your idea for this topic today. So I'm going to turn that over to you for a second.
I feel like Laura and Hardy, when what was it? Laura would say something and then he'd go, say that again or whatever. And he'd go,
yeah,
I can't get it out the same way.
Yes.
I was chatting to someone today, as we both know, and she mentioned some topics and we thought it was a good idea because we've noticed, like you when you do your shows, you do lots of all kinds of Indian, Egyptian, all kinds of stuff. But we've noticed that with us, it's been more meatier subjects, and the relationship side of life seems to come up quite a lot, and people seem to really relate to that. So it was like, what do you do when there's contempt in a relationship? What do you do when you despise or dislike or have no feeling as indifference in a relationship with somebody, and you're with them? You're either married to them, you're living with them, or whatever. Because if you're not living with them and you're in that situation, you can probably walk away a lot easier. But what happens when you're with someone and you've got this indifference and this I don't care, I don't feel anything, but you can't leave that easy. Right. And also, like, when you brought up another topic when we were looking into contempt, and I'm just going to bring up here the feeling that a person or a thing is worthless or beneath consideration. So, for instance, you're with someone and you feel like they don't care about you. They don't give a shit. They don't really worry about you. They treat me with contempt. They speak to me with contempt. And it's a real a big thing, because I don't know about you, but sometimes someone can say something to me and I'll go, who do you think you're speaking to?
Right.
Like, and it's not just in a relationship, it can come from children as well. Like, who do you think you're speaking to? Have a bit of respect, but it doesn't seem like in this day and age there is a lot of that around. So we thought we would look at it as in, like, you and I have been in those situations when we've both been in a relationship where we have been treated, or we did treat someone with contempt. And it goes on, doesn't it, to the name calling and gaslighting and mocking them and all kinds of things.
Well, there are what they call or come to be known as, really the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for a relationship. And that is, the 4 horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt.
Yeah.
And as I've heard it said in recent days, and I've mentioned this on my own show too, in talking about topics like this over the months, is and it was Dennis Prager from PragerU, who has a radio show, longtime host, came up with this, and he said relationships can usually survive big things. Relationships can survive differences of opinion. Mm-hmm. They can survive things coming from the outside. Relationships can survive, believe it or not, relationships can survive infidelity. It all depends on how the people deal with it and how they handle what they're going to do and what they do next. But what a relationship, no matter what the situation is, can never survive is contempt. When you have contempt for the other person, there is no getting around that. And contempt is not usually something that arises overnight. No. It's something that is a long time building. And contempt, as Wendy defined it for you a little earlier, I've got a definition here too. Contempt, a feeling towards another that they are unworthy of any degree of respect and deserving only of scorn and condemnation beneath all consideration. Now, I will say this. There are very few people that I hold in contempt. I would say I tend to be a giving person, a loving person, a positive person. But there are very few people that have pushed me to the point where I have returned to that, even in silence or from a distance, with contempt. This is somebody I once saw. I was in an Irish bookstore, and it was looking at music, and it had a music disc of reels and jigs, and the name of one of the songs on the album was "My Wife Died and I'll Dance a Jig on Her Grave." And so I have said, rather tongue in cheek, there are some people that could fall off the planet and I'd dance a jig. And I wouldn't really give a good goddamn what happened to them. And, oh, she fell off the planet. Yeah. You know what? Couldn't happen to a nicer person. And so that's the kind of thing I think we're talking about. What happens in a relationship when you, and maybe I've overdone it in my description of contempt in the way I view it. And again, just for the record, and Wendy, I'm not contemptuous of many people. Probably I could name two on one hand, and I could say there might be two people I have contempt for. And but they've earned the contempt. And maybe one would say, if I were the Dalai Lama, I could go, oh, you go in peace. I will not hold contempt for you. I could maybe do that. And I saw, interesting, our friend Reuben Fasthorse, who is a Native American language revivalist. I saw a language revivalist who's also Native American on Instagram. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Take your time.
It's still that cold. And he had a word that he gave. Every day he does a word and he describes it. And he said, you've heard the term forgive and forget? He said, in our language, he says, there is forgive, but there is no forget. He says, the word actually means I will treat it as if it never happened. Meaning I will stop remembering it. I won't forget it, but I will stop actively remembering it. And I think what happens in our relationships is there is forgiving and forgetting, and there's things that we can do to do that, but we never actually forget. It's always going to be in our minds and our memories of things that we felt were wrongs committed against us. But we can treat those things with an attitude of saying, I forgive, and I choose to not remember it actively. It will not be in front of my face. And or we can choose to remember them. And I think, let me ask you a question now and expound on this a little bit for me. If we have contempt for someone in a relationship, is that something that somebody made happen to us? Or is that something faulty in us that allows contempt to take over?
When you look at that subject, I always say it depends, and forgive me for being blunt. It depends on the breeding and the background, right?
Sure.
Because first of all, it's how you're brought up. It's how you're shown how to treat people. How you should be guided when you're from your parents upward, how you treat people with respect and with communication. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Now, don't get me wrong. We all lose our temper. We all say things that we shouldn't. You think back and go, oh, why did I say that, and stuff like that. And I always say it's another one. Be careful what you say, because once you've said it, you can't take it back. It's out there forever.
Yes, that's very true.
Contempt is, in any way you want to look about it, it is disrespect.
Yes.
It's like mocking, sarcasm, condescending, rolling your eyes, calling them names, mimic them, taking the piss out of their body language, sneering at them. I have, like Kat has, I was in a relationship which was abusive, and I went through 4.5 years of that, and I could have got out, as you say, people like will say get out any time. It's not so easy, especially when we stop ourselves from getting out. And I think that when you see somebody treat you with disrespect and they talk to you like you're a piece of garbage, your self-esteem goes right down the pan, and you normally start out being very confident and bubbly, and they not be drawn to you for being like this, but then as time goes along they go, oh, I don't like that, I want to stamp on that. Instead of like inflaming that fire, they want to stamp on it, which was in my case. But I also think that negative thoughts, it grows, resentment grows, And
Yes.
why have you become contempt? Where's it come from? Has your relationship died? Is there issues that you're not talking about? Now, if there's abuse of any kind of abuse, I would say to anyone, and talking from someone who didn't, but I would say to anyone, if you can get out, right? And don't
Right.
but if you're in a situation with someone where there isn't abuse, you just have this thing between you and you're like, shut up. I don't want to hear you
Right.
talk. I don't even want to hear you breathe, right? I don't want to be with you. I don't want to hear anything. Or you're with someone and you really do love them, and then they talk to you like that, and you're like, well, hang on a minute.
Excuse me?
Why are you talking to me
Yeah.
like that? What have I done to deserve that? And it's really damaging for the self-esteem, and it's also destructive, because what happens is, and it's a very good point, the three of us were talking about this afternoon, when you have relationships and marriages, if you don't clear that crap from each relationship, you will take that baggage into every single relationship you have after that, right? You're like a tortoise. We carry all our crap like tortoises. All our baggage is on our back, and we get into another relationship. And as I was saying to you, some people go on to have multiple relationships or multiple affairs or multiple marriages, and the same problem comes up again and again and again, because they're not clearing the karma. They're not clearing the crap. They're taking it in, and they should be, instead of having time for themselves to work it out, to have counseling to clear it, they don't. So then what happens is, say I was with Andy for 4 years. I mean, there's never been an Andy in my life, but say I was with an Andy for 4 years, and Andy treated me like crap. And I came out with Andy and went straight in to be with Bob, right? So I've not really had a break, and I've not dealt with my stuff. And I go into that relationship with Bob, I'm carrying demons, and maybe I'll be more reactive to respond to it. And he might say something to me completely normal. And the next thing you know, I'm reacting. It's taken me back to being where I was with Andy. We need to give ourselves time. But I also think, what happens when you're in a situation and you can't get out and you can't break it because there's children, because there's money issues, or whatever, the religious let's be fair, religious stuff as well. What happens when you can't get out and you're trapped? And it's every day.
That's the big question, is what do you do when you have that? I think of what you were saying about how couples, we build this contempt comes on, we build the contempt, either side, either party, maybe both parties have it. The first question I have, if I back it up a little bit, is how do you go from, this is the person who, and I'm only saying things a certain way here by way of illustration to make it an exciting picture in the mind, to understand it more fully than just medicated type of language. But you meet somebody, you fall for that person, you fall in love. Suddenly you're doing things together, you're eating together, you're naked together, your genitals touch each other, you do all that stuff, you shower together, you walk the dogs together, you go to the beach together, you do all this stuff. You can't get enough of each other. And as for some reason, one or the other, whether or not you get married and have children, no matter how long you're together, some people are maintain that the rest of their lives, and they couldn't live without each other. And it's wonderful to watch and see. But then there are many people, and I was going to say many of us, there are many people, and I put us in that because I've been there before, that all of a sudden you look back and you say, when did this go so bad? When did this turn south? Why do I dislike that person so much? So much so that I don't even want to spend time with them. Or conversely, why does that person no longer want to spend time with me? What did I do? I'm the same. Guys will usually say, I'm the same guy she married. I'm the same guy. It's not that we don't grow and do things, but it's like, my personality is the same person. I was an adult when we met. I'm still an adult. And And so you ask these questions, and you say, that's the first place I go when looking at this stuff, is I say, okay, first of all, you got to recognize there are people and relationships you are either in now or you have been in where you are one or the other. Maybe one of those three options. Things are going great, and you're doing great, and you love each other. And people always say, well, it takes work. You ask the people who love each other and have kept that up, they're going to say, we had to work at it, but it's not work because I love this person. What happens to the couples where they no longer want to work on things? It becomes work when you make it something that has to be worked on.
Yeah.
It's not work all by itself. Like I used to say, and I've said to you a million times over the years, in my situations, in your situations, I've said, look, if I love somebody, it's going to take a team of wild horses to keep me from expressing that, to keep me from being there, to keep me from wanting to do that. And it would have to be a team of specifically wild horses that does that. But there are some people who can walk away. Oh, I'm done. Or they don't leave right away, but they hold you in contempt. And the contempt rises from what, Wendy? It rises from, I'm going to have you pitch in on this, but it rises from, I'm stuck with you.
Yeah.
I'm wasting my life with you.
I'm trapped.
Right. And usually only a dick will walk away from something cold and go, hey, good morning. There's a note on the table. I'm leaving you. Goodbye. I'll send somebody for the rest of my stuff. And boom, they're gone. And not many people do it that way. Most people, what's that?
Or they look for someone else.
Or they look for someone else.
If they're in a marriage or a relationship and it's broken, it's broken down, instead of them leaving and ending it and just going, it's not working, it's done, over, they will then get involved with someone else, which is kind of unfair to the new person they're getting involved with, because they're not clear of that crap. Mm-hmm. They're not clear of that previous thing. It's still hanging around. And it's like, I want to give an example. So you're in a relationship, you've not had sex in months, and you go to a party and someone's chatting to you and you're having a laugh and joke, and your partner goes, why are you flirting with that person?
Yeah.
Why are you flirting with them?
And what's the response? Usually you want to say something like, why do you care?
And then they go, why don't you just go and marry him? Or why don't you just go and shag him because you don't want to shag me, or whatever? And all those feelings will come out, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And the other person's going, I was just, and that's the trouble is, I think what happens is that it's poison. So if your relationship breaks down, and you can do this, get out. Right, just get out. It's far kinder to both of you and helpful to the both of you to leave, right? But the thing is, this is what people don't talk about. Like, how many relationships and friendships do you know? I know quite a few people right now that are in situations like this, and they want to leave, and they don't want to be there, and they want their life to change, but they can't because of circumstances is holding them there. Yes. Whether that be children, whether that be money. And it's like, it takes a lot of guts. I was going to use another word then, but I didn't. It takes a lot of guts to actually...
Like balls?
Bollocks was the word.
Bollocks. Thank you, Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, it takes a lot of bollocks to leave. And, how... If you're lying in bed next door to someone and you're like, you know what I mean? They're there beside you, and you're just like, it's really awful. And it's like, Roy's written down, well, brother, heavy stuff. But the thing is, people are going through this right now. And it's like, we just come up with this topic because we were talking to someone who actually said right now in their life, they're going through this and they don't know what to do about it. And they really hope that the universe does its own thing to make things different, to make it change. But I also think that we find it very hard to tell someone, like when I was in that situation, I didn't have the confidence to speak up and say, don't speak to me like that. Or
Right.
I ended up putting up with it, just shutting up, just not saying anything. So my personality got pushed down and down and down until I was a shadow of my former self. And all your friends and everybody noticed that, you know, you're very, very sensitive. You're very, very, you know, criticism, you know, and when you come out of that situation, you're like a Rottweiler. You're like, I'm not having that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you meet that next person down along the way, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, what's with you?"
Yeah.
Not because this is something we do. We carry our bags with us.
We do.
I said to you when we were talking about this earlier, that it's like these scenarios. I see it as a picture in my head, like a black background and little spotlights, like on a stage. And each spotlight is one of your relationships.
Mhm.
And this one, you've finally worked yourself out of a bad relationship and you start moving toward into the dark. And then you're into a new spotlight. And then you notice there's a chain on the ankle. And what's dragging along with the chain? But the baggage from the previous relationship.
Mhm.
And then that relationship, if you don't resolve that and don't cut that chain, break that chain, drop that baggage, guess what's going to happen? It's going to ruin that relationship too. And I'm mixing a lot of different variables into this.
Oh, I get it.
But that relationship can end. And then you move through the dark and you're into the next spotlight or relationship. And now you got two chains with more bags attached. And the person who does not deal with the baggage, for lack of a better term to put it, or the things that they drag along with them, will perpetually and forever drag those things along with them. They have to break the chain of that those events, and that's usually not done by hopping into the sack with somebody new or hopping into a relationship without thinking about it. These are things that have to be carefully dealt with.
Too many
And there was
do that, though,
something else I'm going to say about that, and it's gone from me because I rabbit trailed. But
so many people do that, though. It's like it's so easy to, the relationship's not great. You need a bit of excitement in your life. Oh, let's go on to let's talk to someone, and you know them on a dating app. I've used the dating app, and you're talking to someone, and they'll come up recently separated, right? Just looking to see what's out there, or you're talking to them and then they just disappear and they block and they ghost you, and you're just like, okay, so basically it's like it's a fix, it's a scratch. It's far easier to do that, to bring some, but what a mess. I mean, we've done it. We've all been there, to bring someone else in and go, yeah, like I want to get out of this situation, but it's not so easy. There's the kids, there's money involved, but the relationship is dead. How many times have we heard that from other people?
Yes.
Really like you. My relationship is only in name only. It's dead. But at the end of the day, let's get involved with you, and then relationship isn't dead and they're still involved. They're just looking for the jollies to make their life worth living. But then the person who's been put down and put down and put down, they're either going to do two things. They're either going to look for that, or they're going to be so screwed up that the nicest person on the planet could give them a compliment and they go, what are you saying that to me for? What you after? What do you want? And I can really understand that. I've been there.
It would be awfully nice if we as people could speak what's on our mind. We used to, in my ministry days, and I hail back to that because that's where most of my counseling was. There was a biblical verse that we quoted an awful lot that said, speak the truth in love. And so we can speak a truth and be absolutely unloving about it. Or we can speak the truth and be loving about it. That's a guideline for how we should act. So if we could all tell the truth to the people that we're with, either one of, I don't like the way you are becoming or the way you're treating me. And I've used this in the past, in my past relationships. I know this line well. I would say, hey, I don't deserve to be talked to that way. I don't deserve to have you call me those names. I don't deserve to be hit, or things like that, which has all happened to me in past relationships. You'd think a big guy like me wouldn't be abused, but I've been abused plenty. And I will say this, just to, for the record, it's not that I couldn't defend myself or couldn't stop it. It's that the way our laws and our system was set up, there's not much you could do. A man can't really grab a woman's hands to stop her from hitting him without him being accused of abusing her.
Yeah.
And at least that's the way it was at the time this happened to me. We're talking 30
well,
years.
I think it's still the same way. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once women beat men, and just as much as men beat women, sadly.
Yeah.
But I also think contempt is rejection. And rejection, as you and I were talking about today, is the worst feeling in the world. When you meet someone and you really like them and you spend a lot of time and investment getting to know them, and then, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. But what about when they just disappear really quickly out of your life? You're like, oh my God. And if you keep having that happen to you and it keeps happening, you're going to be like, I don't want to put myself out there anymore, because if I do that, this is all I'm going to get back. And so you eventually meet someone. So I think that contempt, rejection, indifference, I remember like being in a public bar, public place, I should say, and being spoken to like I was a piece of rubbish on their show, and everybody heard. Like it was like everyone, because they turned around and shouted, and everybody heard. And I just stood there and I was just like, I should just have the confidence to just go, sod you, and left, right?
And you wish you had the confidence to look at them and say, are you okay that everybody in here just heard you talk that way to me? And those are the things you don't think about because we get wrapped up in being rejected or whatever it might be, whatever our own little insecurity is. It might be things we didn't even know we were insecure about. Yeah. And it taps your insecurity right away. And you go, whoa, why did that person I'm supposed to be in love with and that's supposed to be in love with me just say that in front of all these other people? How am I supposed to act and save face and not look like I'm embarrassed by it? And at the same time, because I don't want people to think it's true and I should be embarrassed, but how do all these thoughts go through your head?
But everybody knows it's just heard you. They just know. They go, look, they look at you with that look, don't they? Like, and I've been outside where I live, and I've seen a guy really berating a woman, and he's swearing at her, and he's right in her face, and that to me is a real red rag, right?
Yes.
Because when I see someone else do that, I'm like, and the thing is, and then, you watch them and they go after them and they go, it's okay, but I love you. Like, it's fine. It's like, what? If we really come to that, like, I'm sure we can all look back. And it's also like withholding. Contempt can also come with withholding infection, withholding sex, withholding talking to them, like, being very open. If a couple cannot really communicate about everything, and sometimes it's not an easy subject to have, right? Because you're kind of like, I really wish you could do that. Yep. But it comes in different forms. It's like, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you tell me about this? You didn't need to know. It was like, I went and talked to someone else about it. Now, we all need that person to talk about, the friend or whatever. Yes. I always go to my best friend. Of course I do, like, to chat about everything, because she's my sounding block. She's my sponge. But your partner could turn around and say, well, why didn't you come to me?
Yes.
Why didn't you share that with me?
Yeah. I was looking for a quote while you were talking about that. It's a Humphrey Bogart quote from Casablanca. What I still believe, no matter how cliche it is one of the most classic, finest movies ever made, complete finest movies. And there's that scene where he's supposed to meet her at the train, and he gets the letter instead. And it says, and he says, the wow finish. A guy standing on a station platform in the rain with a comical look on his face because his insides have just been kicked out. That's the way we feel when we get those things that happen to us, men or women. Your insides get kicked out and you don't know what to say, and you're left holding the Dear John letter in the rain, or the insult, or whatever it might be. And I don't want to ignore the point you were making, but I wanted to jump back to that with that, because those are the things that leave those feelings of rejection. And what makes us feel rejected? I'm going to ask you, Wendy, why do we feel rejected when we feel rejected?
Well, because we have all these high hopes and expectations. First of all, we've been showered perhaps with love and affection and attention, and we're in that false, I wouldn't say that, false sense of security, but we're in that this person really wants me and loves me and is happy with me. When they then take that away or something happens, it's a shock to the system. It's like, I'm not seeing this. It's a real, I never saw this coming. For instance, some forms of contempt is derisive humor. So if someone's calling you a loser, you're ugly, you're fat, you're this, you're that. And it's like, oh, it's just their sense of humor. Oh, it's just,
get them. Ha ha ha. Aren't they cute?
Yeah. Right. Exaggerations. And you're talking about something and they'll go, you're exaggerating. She's so dramatic. It's all an exaggeration. She's so dramatic, right? That's another form of contempt. Then there's the facial expressions, like raising the upper lip, the eye rolling, the sneering, like, really? Are you sure? This can all be forms of like, and then obviously that someone who shows you complete disdain. They just really don't, like, you're ill. I remember this very well. I was ill, not feeling at all well. And I remember saying to this particular person, I really don't feel well. And it was like, well, you never feel well. You never feel well. And to be honest, I'm a bit sick of hearing about it, Wendy. So if you don't mind, I'd like to watch the movie. And I was like, someone had.
If you don't mind, I'd like to watch the movie.
And it was just like, I just go and die on my own then, shall I? And literally it's like, you've got to look, and it's also about selfishness as well. Like, say you're cooking a meal, right, for someone, they're coming from work, you're at home, you're the wife at home, you're doing everything, or the husband at home doing everything, and the other person comes in and they go, well, you're at home all day, I'm the one out working and earning, what's your problem? What are you doing all day? And they were like, well, actually, I'm at home taking care of everything and taking care of the family and keeping everything going. So I am doing a job. And they're going, oh, yeah, but, I'm bringing in the money. I'm the breadwinner. So it's the power. It's the power struggle as well,
it's
right?
The power of dollars, or pounds. That's the thing, too, and that's mostly a guy thing. You see that more with guys than women. But men are like, hey, I'm the one earning the money here. And that's where most women say, okay, how about we trade that out? How about I go be the one who makes the money and you be the one that stays at home? Let's trade for 2 weeks and tell me that you're not working. And so I've got a couple of notes that I jotted down here.
I love your notes.
Well, this one goes like this. Contempt is rarely a thing that comes out of the blue. Although it might seem that way to the person experiencing it or to the one who's the recipient of it. It occurs as a result of denied or undealt with disappointment, resentment, anger, and hurt. The circumstances that cause us to experience those unpleasant feelings towards someone, they don't ever disappear. In fact, they become intensified until they're addressed in such a way that neutralizes their cause. You have to neutralize the cause. And clearing the strong feelings can sometimes occur without involving the other person's participation in the healing process, by either forgiving them, And like that guy said, forgetting. He says, we don't forget. We just choose to not act as if we remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one, more than often than not, we need to have the talk, that bringing an incompletion to another person can feel risky. Since we're opening the possibility they might be angry, become angry, they might become hurt, since we're the bearer of the difficult news. So rather than speak up, what do we normally do? We withhold our feelings, hoping that they're going to go away, the feelings, and that we won't have anything to say. But these negative feelings erode the foundation of the relationship. It deepens the mistrust, deepens resentment, it deepens anxiety, deepens disappointment, deepens distance. One of the killers in a relationship, you notice, is distance. It's the lack of intimacy, the lack of closeness.
Intimacy, that's so cool.
Yeah. And moving into the territory of contempt is like going from being unhappy to being profoundly depressed. That's the click over in there. And it's difficult to recover from any of that due to the powerfully entrenched grip that it has on us.
I was thinking, though, what about the people that are doing the contempt? What about, because we're looking at those, if we're in it where it's happening to us, but what about if you're the person that is treating and has treated someone with contempt? Because I think we're all guilty at one point in our life of doing it, of saying something or hurting somebody or treating them and being sarcastic. What if we're with someone we don't want to be with anymore? And you know what it's like. You start to like, little things get to you. You start getting snippy. You start getting snipey towards them. You start getting like, you don't, this is all right. I mean, yes, all right. You know, you look all right. What's your problem? And it's like, where do we learn contemptness? Where do we learn it? Well, we would learn it from our backgrounds. We would learn it from our parents, right? So if your father and mother were in that sort of relationship and you saw mum and dad going for it at each other, or perhaps mum would berate dad or dad would berate mum, or there was abuse in that, it becomes something we're used to, something that we grow up with. And it was like, well, as you say, you become, what's the word when you see so much happen in the world today and you become
jaded.
It doesn't affect you as much because you're so used to it. And so when you get into relationships of your own, you've learned that pattern of behavior because it's come all the way down from mum and dad, right? And
yes.
You know, my dad, for instance, treated my mum with contempt, and he would say that, you know, some awful things to her, and she obviously, like, she learned to literally, well, after it took her down a lot, she learned to turn around and do that. But I think the people that's doing it, it's like, do they get something out of it? We've all desensitized. That's the one. Thank you, Debbie.
There it is. Yeah, I was going to say thank you, Debbie.
And that's the thing when you're in an abusive relationship. As much as you hate it, you get used to it and you put up with it. Or, you know, I know a particular person, they carry a bit of weight. They're very sensitive about it and they try desperately to lose it. And they try and get frisky, or they try and pay attention to somebody, and it gets rejected. And they just go, right, okay, then. And you know, and it makes you feel like shit. And instead of having positive communication going, look, this is not working. We're not, this is really not working. Let's just find a way out of it. They don't. And so how do you deal with contempt? How do you actually stop it in its tracks?
You're asking me?
Direct communication would be one, but how many people have the guts to do that?
I think many times you cannot stop the other person from acting the way they choose to act.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an impossible task.
It's a choice.
Now, you can only hope that your actions would help turn them around. But when the other person is acting contemptuously, there's not much you can do to change that. Because many times those contemptuous feelings from that person can be focused on certain things. You put on weight, you don't make enough money,
Mhm.
you don't spend time doing this, you don't have sex with me anymore. All those things that build contempt
Yeah.
are all things that are all workable situations until you choose not to work on them. So when somebody is acting contemptuously, they've already made a choice to be contemptuous, whether they define it that way or not. So what are you left with? What are you left holding at that point? What do you do? And that's the first question you asked me yesterday or the other day, whenever it was we started talking about this. And you said, what do you do? Because it was somebody said something in our show last week that prompted this question.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who it was, but they said, what do you do when the love is gone? And I think that's what morphed its way into you and I talking about the contempt issue.
I think it was very prominent last week, when we
Yes.
did our show, that there was somebody that really joined in and gave in a lot of insight. And we're all walking around in our own lives, and we don't, if it's happening to us, sometimes it feels like it's not happening to anyone else, or
Yeah.
you don't want to talk about it because you're embarrassed about it, or people don't see it. How many times have we all gone to a dinner party or a gathering, and you're with your other half, and you're like, you feel like crap. You feel like absolute crap.
I would have a really fun time if I weren't here with that person who makes me feel like crap.
But I also think it's like respect is everything, because contempt comes from disrespect. If you don't have a partner that you don't respect, or they don't respect you, contempt will grow, right?
Yes.
And there's lots. I mean, Heather's right when she says it's a very loaded conversation. It can go in many different ways.
Hi, Heather.
It can. But it's like, respect is everything in a relationship. Without respect, you can't. If you're with someone and you look at them and you go, I don't respect you, you've got no there's discontent there.
Yes.
Respect is everything,
Granted, there are people who can earn awful lot of disrespect from their partner. There are things that you can do that can shut off the intimacy, that can shut off the respect.
Yeah.
But like I said at the very beginning, for those of you who've joined us a little bit later, we said at the very beginning, most relationships can survive anything that gets thrown at them until there is contempt. Contempt is the one thing that cannot be overcome. Once there is contempt, that is the bottom line of disrespect, hatred, if you will. Can somebody come back from having a contemptuous feeling about somebody? Maybe. I think it's more rare in those cases, because that has grown so long to hit that point that there is no longer any salvation for that, any salvific quality to trying to make something work. There's nothing left to work on. And so you and I, we were starting to come to possible solutions. What do you do when you face this contempt? What do you do when you have a partner that holds you in contempt? What do you do when you are the person that holds your partner in contempt?
Well, it doesn't grow overnight, does it? I mean, it literally is. You're talking about something that takes a time to grow.
A lot of time to get there. And let me ask you, can decent people hold the other person in contempt? Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
You can be in contempt of someone for something they've done or the way they act or whatever it is. What you need to do, though, I believe, anybody who has that, is you have to examine yourself. Find out what is bringing these feelings of contempt. Is it something that somebody did to me and this is the way I'm reacting? Is it my expectations that I set at this level and they didn't meet them, and so I'm contemptuous of them? You've got to look at it and say, what has caused the contempt? But it is an insurmountable thing. Elderberry says, what about just having mistrust and contempt for falling in love or even searching for love? You're talking about
absolutely know where it's come from, because you have, it's like, what is the point of falling in love? What is the point of actually searching for anyone anymore? Because most people are either full of bullshit or not, have no intention to go down that road, or are emotionally unavailable, or they're narcissistic or whatever. People don't want to go outside and put themselves out there anymore, because they're like, there's no point, there's no point.
Right.
So we do get very, what's the word? Jaded, hard,
cynical, jaded.
I mean, it's well known. Because when I'm saying in my life, my wall goes up so quicker, people hear it. They like hear the bricks going up, right? But I think you can get over it. But it's, first of all, I think that wherever it comes from, if you're the one giving it, you've got to really look at yourself and go, what am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I acting like this? And I either need to stop this, or I need to get out, or I need to communicate. Or, you've got to look at yourself first. And the person that's receiving it it's certainly not doing much for their self-esteem, but they also need to go, this is not working for me anymore. This is not doing anything. But we don't, because we're like, we've got kiddies, or we've got money, or we've got situations. The second one is communication, direct communication. Absolutely 100% brutal, blunt. I'm not having this anymore. I'm not liking you speaking to me like that. And if the love has gone between two people, then you have to be really honest with each other and say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, or I like you, but I'm not in love with you. And we both need to move on, because life is too short. And I know it's going to be tough going, and I know there might be kids, and I know there might be this, that, and the other, but it's not fair for the children to grow up seeing this.
That's very true. Heather says contempt is overcoming. And I'm wondering, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you mean contempt is something that is overcomeable? You can overcome contempt, because you go on to say, what's not is when two people don't love each other. That's when that's gone, it's over. And that's what I'm talking about. Contempt, I think, rises out of losing that love for someone else.
Yes, it does.
And you know what? We've got about 30 seconds, and we have to go from the radio audience. But to use proper English, don't nobody go nowhere, because we'll be right back right here. We're going to take a quick break after we say goodbye to the radio audience. And you all just sit tight right there. We'll be right back. So you think I'd have prepared that ahead of time. Here we go. So radio audience, live long and prosper. Everybody else, sit tight. We'll be right back here in the YouTube channel. Hey, folks, we're back here. It's not the captain's cabin. I wanted to say what the captain's cabin are, which is what we do after the Intrepid radio program, is the after show. This is just a bit of afterglow with Wendy and Scotty after Robertson. And we're just live. We're off the radio station, and we're just live over on the YouTube channel. And we ended on some pretty intense or high notes here that I think we should continue on with. Heather Marie said contempt is overcoming. It's overcomable. You're in the act of overcoming. You can actively overcome it. There you go. What's not is when two people don't love each other. That's when it's gone. So our big question at the beginning of the show is, what brings contempt out of someone? Go ahead, Wendy.
I just wanted to say, like, of all the years I did counseling, and I did relationship counseling, I heard so many people sit opposite each other saying some really awful things. And you don't do this. What about when you do this? And what about when you said that? He does this, she does that. You know, they're ripping each other apart. This was, and as a counselor, you've got him or her or him and him or whatever you want to put it. And then you have the relationship. And my job as a counselor was to concentrate on the relationship. I'm there for the relationship. Yes, I'm supporting these two people, but I'm supporting the relationship, right?
Right.
And the fact is, that gets lost along the way because those two feelings become so prominent, the relationship takes a back step. So you've got like her and his or his and his or whatever. And then you've got the relationship. So the contempt is for it's for the people. The contempt is for each person. But is it for the relationship? Because the relationship is the third thing in it is the third wheel, you know, it is. Yeah. And people forget about that. They just think he does this or she says that, whatever. Yep. It's not. It's like, but what about your relationship? Because, you know, you've cared enough to give it this long, or you got married, or whatever you did, you lived together. And it's like it's so easy. It's so easy to rip everybody apart, isn't it? But it sure is. It's the hardest thing in the world to sit down and go, do you know what? We need to sort this out. Let's do it.
Well, who just said over here? Anita Palmer says, you can still feel, excuse me, you can feel contempt for a person and still love them, can't you? I think it's a different kind of thing. I think a person who feels contemptuous of another, contempt, remember, is very deep-seated. It's something that's been processed for a long time. Yeah. It doesn't appear overnight or after you're eating your bowl of Wheaties and you go, I'm contemptuous now. It's something that's built to that point. And the tendency towards contempt, as I've written down here, is a habit that's been co-created by both partners. It's a co-creation. If a partner's is conflict avoidant, meaning they're going to avoid all conflict, and they're inclined to deal with their feelings by nursing anger or grudges or destructive fantasies that they've made up in their own heads, over time, if unchecked, that's a pattern that can destroy even a really good relationship. And so the key word is unchecked. It's when we pay closer attention to our relationship's needs and respond to them in a timely manner, the deterioration into contempt becomes a much lower possibility for us. And when we check out of our relationship, and there's the key, when we check out of our relationship, we're sowing the seeds of contempt. And we're putting the relationship itself at risk. And it's a lot of courage and commitment, I think, to hold ourselves as being deserving of respect and consideration.
I mean, the thing is as well, if you think about it, like if you, before you know, when you first got together, you got all those great stuff. If you in a relationship now with contempt, look down memory lane and actually go, I remember when I really loved you. I remembered when I really felt all these things about you. And actually look at everything and go, can I feel those feelings again? Can I bring them back? But you can only bring them back if the other person is willing to meet you halfway, right? You can't, Scott, you should see the faces. You're just, I'm sorry, I couldn't keep a straight face there because poor old Scotty has frozen. Oh, he's back now. He's back in the room. Thank you, Barbara, for that. For instance, let me get back onto my stride now, and I'm looking at this. Oh, he's back in the room. You should have seen your face, Scotty, when you actually like froze for a minute. It was something.
It's always in a weird expression, isn't it, when it does that?
Literally, what we were saying is like if you go down memory lane and you remember when everything was great. If you've still got that feeling for that person and you want to try and repair it, okay, invest, perhaps look at counseling, look for the positives, revisit your past, but at the same time, instead of criticizing, make your point. Like, don't bring them down, don't rip them apart, but just say, this upsets me when you do this, or this,
Yeah.
I have to, this isn't, I'm not happy with this. But the thing is as well, Scotty, if the other person doesn't feel the same and you're trying to fix it on your own, it comes back to my favorite saying about the bank. You invest as much as the other person. Otherwise, it's like this. You've got to invest the same emotionally.
It's imbalanced. Yep.
Yeah. You get out what you put in.
Debbie Treadway just said it's got to be equal efforts made.
Absolutely.
Exactly. There has to be that equal effort.
So important. Put yourself, if you're criticizing your partner, not that they ever do actually, but try and put yourself in their shoes. And also, like last week, I think it was Rudy who said that, when they married me, they knew I was disabled. They knew I had issues. And now I get those comments said about me. So I don't feel like I'm equal. I don't feel like I make a difference anymore. And I think it's not what we say to people. It's how you say it.
Right.
That's a great movie. I'm just going to go and piss on the fish. War of the Roses. It was.
War of the Roses. Yeah.
Kathleen Turner.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd want a divorce. If it got to a point when it was contempt, or a relationship was contempt, I would get to a point where I was like, I've got to get out. I've got to get out somehow. Mm-hmm. And killing them is not an option.
Not an option. I think what leads to a lot of contempt in relationships is people don't feel respected because the other person, or maybe it's you and the other person, the way you deal with the other person, everybody's got their own set of expectations. Everybody's got their own set of what are the values or methodologies that they bring to a relationship. Uh-huh. And unless you are willing to blend those from the very beginning and set out, those things could be things that splinter you from the beginning and keep it going.
Yeah, you've got to have that. Say, for instance, you're with someone, and when you met them, they used to take care of themselves, and they looked really good.
Yeah.
And then they let themselves go, and they're sitting there with just their, the shorts on, or a dirty tracksuit or whatever, and you look at them and you're like, really? That's what we've come to, is it? That, I come home, you look like that, you don't make an effort. 3 or 4 years down the line, you still got to make an effort. And it can be hard when you've got children. It can be hard when there's issues. It can be hard when you've got problems. But somehow you have to make some kind of effort, because otherwise the other person's going to look at you and go, yeah.
Yeah. And I have a little thing that goes on in my household that you are aware of. About halfway through the show, I was in the middle of some big talking point, and my wife came in and needed to ask me something, and I just ignored her because I'm on a radio show. I'm doing a radio show, and everybody knows I've done radio since we've been married, and all my kids know it. But does anybody? There was one point where was it? It was in between. Was it the end of the show? Yeah, because we were off camera. My little daughter's screaming and playing hide and seek and comes running in here and go, nope, out, because we're going right back on air. And I said, I do not need you in here. So there is a point where there is, and now I was able to talk to my wife for just a minute. That's where I had you talk, and I went on mute. And I said, did you need me for something? Well, yeah, your daughters, Abby and Bryn, are trying to get a hold of you, and this is going on, and that's going on. And I'm going to take the kids out. I'm taking them all to the chiropractor. And I needed to have you do this for me or get this link to me and that. And I said, I was doing a radio show from 4 to 5. Well, are you still doing radio? I said, well, just a little fallout now. And she said, well, I got to go. I got to take the kids. And so she's out the door. Mm-hmm. But the chiropractor, my wife and I had been together all day, and it never came up all day. So it was a new twist. Yeah. Since I've been on radio, she called in to get everybody into the chiropractor. And so these are the kinds of things that people do to each other or experience with each other. And if they don't talk them through, my wife's view of me could be, I was not tuned into the family for a need that needed to be taken care of. But it was for that 1 hour where my expectation was my family doesn't invade on this space because I'm on radio with somebody else. And we've got an audience that deserves that we need to respect.
And I also think when you're talking about certain subjects as well, I've said before, with certain subjects, you have to be careful because you can't have younger kids around. And I think it's just a case of like, if I knew my partner was on something for a while, I would, unless it was a downright emergency, I would just wait, because otherwise it's not very what's the word?
So my family is so used to interrupting me during radio when they aren't supposed to, that my wife came in and was waiting to say something to me. At least she didn't just blurt out whatever was on her mind.
Yeah.
These are issues that, now, is that a problem in our relationship? Not necessarily. It was a problem. It was a temporal problem of the moment. And it's one of remembering what needs to be done, what expectations are, what has been requested. During radio time, don't ask this. And everything else was stuff that all came up after I started the show. So it's going to have to wait till the end of the show.
But I also think it's what you put up with, because what you settle for stays. And if you don't stop it, if you don't break it, if you don't say, this is non-negotiable, unless someone's bleeding or stopping breathing,
right?
This is non-negotiable. I'm not using in your example. I'm just saying in general.
Yes.
Like, if someone's talking to you that way, and if you don't stop it in its bud, and we're all guilty of not doing that, but if you don't stop it in its bud, it will carry on. You get what you settle for.
Yeah. And I will say this. Let's personalize this just a little bit. Not contempt. I'm not talking about contempt from my wife or me toward my wife. But there are issues that go on in relationships. Yeah. In ours, radio is a thing where my wife will infract those rules that are said of, when I'm on radio, save it till I'm off radio, because I've got an audience. Doesn't matter if it's 30 people. It doesn't matter if it's 30,000 people. Yeah. There's an audience there. Sometimes in my show,
if you were on television, you couldn't do it.
That's right. And yet those things keep there are infractions. But my wife's attitude might be one of, well, radio doesn't make you any money and it doesn't contribute to our coffers. Therefore, it's not something that you should have as strict a rule on as you do. And it's one where I would counter and say, oh, but you can't determine that for me. If we're going to agree that I'm doing this radio show 3 times a week with my show, 1 day a week with this show, that there are not to be interruptions for those 4 hours during the week. No interruptions. And it's run rampant with my kids. It was part of a little bit of the charm of my own show, was that I had the familial interruptions. The kids would always come at the beginning of the show. Well, it's gotten to the place where I need to really calm that down because it got abused and taken advantage of by the kids. And so here's where you have a situation where there are two.
This show, it isn't just you, it's me. And the subjects we talk about are very different. And I think that, it's the same as if I was working with Rainey and doing the other one. It would be nice for her not to be interrupted at any time because she's involved in something. She's in that subject. So she has that time for her. And I think, we all need that time, whether it's, whatever it is, we all need that time. And I think that it comes down to that. I want to say the word respect, as in the fact that you respect the time limit, you respect what's going on. You really need to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I agree. And there's Anita said, as marriages grow and change, and both people need to go with the flow or be left behind. I think that might be a little too harsh, Anita, for what I'm thinking. Because I think that the ebb and the flow and the growing and the changing and the going with the flow, that all grows. You have to grow along with that. There are things that I'm doing radio now in ways that I didn't do when Rainey and I first met each other. The first few years we were dating, I wasn't doing a show at that time. I'd had a show in the past, and I didn't do a show till a few years later again. But so there are things that come into our relationship that are, hey, I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, or this thing has risen up, or like chiropractor tonight. Hey, nobody told me because nobody knew until the last minute.
But even though you're not getting paid for this at the moment, you're actually doing a service because of the subject you're talking about. Somebody somewhere will listen to this show and actually it will resonate with them and it might help them like it did last week, and it makes a difference. And therefore, there is a payback. You have helped someone, even if it's in a small way. They might not want to talk about it. They might just be listening to it. They might not even want to come up and do a comment.
Do you know what that is? That's the esoteric of it. That's the unseen thing. That's the thing that comes. You're doing something that's good. What it doesn't do is satisfy the immediate expectation. That's not doing this. Therefore, you should leave that and do this because this will get more of where I think you need to be. And those are the kinds of things that couples can have arguments about. They can have disagreements about. Those are the things that can lead to, if not put in check, if not understood, and an effort made for each other to understand each other, that can be destroyers. And it doesn't have to be my situation, but things like this, the things that we expect of the other party. And when that party doesn't fulfill that, it can lead to us being contemptuous of them.
I think it needs
losing respect or whatever.
When she says about you need to go with the flow, what that means is you either grow together and you flow together, because if you don't, one of you does get left behind because the other person is moving on and growing and flowing. And if the other person's putting their foot down and going, I'm not doing it. If you don't encourage your partner, if you don't inspire your partner, if you don't support them, that will lead to resentment. That will lead to even if we don't understand, like say, for instance, you go to football 3 times a week and you go, it's only for an hour 3 times a week. I'm helping this or whatever. I'm doing something. I might not like it, but if it makes you feel alive, if it makes you feel like you make a difference or it makes you feel good about it, as long as you're coming in doing other stuff in that week, that makes a difference. It's a balance. It's balance your expectations. Anita's just written here, I didn't mean anyone as in you. I do know people who've left marriage because the mate was. It's true. It's absolutely true what she's saying. And all these people so you are making a difference. You may not be getting paid as yet, but you are making a difference because like last week, and like I know people that watch this show but never comment. And I have had three or four of them say to me in the last week, you made some really good points and it really made me think, right? So I know it's making a difference to people, but they might just not putting it out there on the comments.
And by the way, I bring up this situation that just happened with my wife and I, not to say this is an example of contempt, saying this is an example of the kinds of interactions that normal people have and the kinds of expectations that normal people have. So now what we might need to do as a result of today is just say, hey, I didn't know you were going anywhere, or you knew I had a radio show, or the girls didn't know I had a radio show. My older daughters needed something from me. They didn't know that. So we got to set all that right and make sure, that doesn't happen again. And there has to be an expectation set that at this time, this will happen. That's why it's been more than once, by the way, on this show and my radio show, that at 1 minute to the official end of my show, my wife will be standing in the door waiting for the clock to go off so she can okay, are you done now? And I said, we're going a few minutes. Yeah, that's when I put you on. So we're going a few minutes. We're going to answer a few questions and do a couple of things, a little fallout from the show. And so those are the things that can be problems if you let them be problems.
And also, as I said, the thing is, there is 2 of us. Not just one. This is if it was your show, it's different because it's your show and you're in control of that. This is ours, and it's so it comes across with both of us. And I would be mortified if it was coming in from my end. I would be mortified side. And I always say to my friend who's here, and even with Henry, I get him settled. So unless something majorly emergency happens, which can happen, fair enough. But it's how you handle it. And so there was one thing I wanted to say to you is that we talked about pre-recording the show. We talked about pre-recording it right from the start, because my one concern was that, there would be interruptions and you're just getting stuck into a point like tonight and things happen. And also, and we pre-recorded the first show, which I still think is one of our best shows. And, it may be the fact that we go back to pre-recording some of them because, and it means that we don't get people's inputs and people go, oh, but it's not live. Well, one of the reasons we did pre-record it was because we didn't want there to be interruptions.
Yes. And there's not many shows you watch on TV. Radio is a little different that are live anyway.
Yeah.
But you can, even when I pre-recorded my show, I would always sit in the chat room when the recorded show aired, so I could talk to people in the chat room while I was playing the recorded show that I recorded usually earlier the same day. And so there's ways to get around that.
But it's also a way, as I said, of where you come from and in your background. Like I was brought up with, you don't do this, you don't do that. It was manners. You stopped here. The buck has to stop somewhere. And it's like, I wouldn't dream of, I wouldn't dream of going in, because it's like, It's not, what's the word? Professional is the word I want to use. Unless it's an emergency and someone's dropping dead, and they better be dropping dead or they're ill or sick or whatever.
Right.
So I get what you're saying but I think that was the reason that the live show is wonderful because other people can interact with us.
Yes.
But I wonder sometimes if the having it pre-recorded would stop.
We'll give it a try sometime and slip it in on y'all, and none of you may even know that it was pre-recorded. I had people when I would sit in my chat room and I'd type
again
because my pre-recorded show was playing. I'd have people say, "How are you typing while you're talking? You do a pretty good job at multitasking." I'd say, "Yes, I do."
So it may be something that we can look at, but obviously people won't get,
Yes.
But can you imagine if we were on, and we have talked about doing this, what's it called? Begins with P. We talked about it the other week.
Yeah.
Then people were paying or looking at it, and it's like, you can't have that, right? You just can't have it. You can't.
Yeah.
They were like, delete. So it's like you're going to look at it, and I think it's something that communication. You're going to have a little chat there, my lovely. I think so.
Yes. Yes. So
on a good point, my one's been really quiet.
Yes, he has. And my children have been basically quiet today too. So, which is good. And that's one of the downsides of operating from home.
Yeah.
And pardon me, I have to take a little drink.
But I hope today that some people have found, or at least anyone who watches this show, whether it's now or whenever, actually, if they're going through something like this, can actually realize that there is ways out of it. And it is actually looking inside yourself and realizing that, first of all, if you're receiving it, you are worth so much more, and your life is worth so much more. If you're actually giving it to somebody, stop. And if you can't stop it, get out.
Yes, agreed. All right. And on that note, I think that's the best way to wrap this show into a neat little knot and send it off. So, Wendy, thank you for everything. Thank you for all your input and everything you have to say. I love you as always.
I love you
too.
And
every one of you here, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time more than you can know. And we really hope that you'll come back again and that you'll refer this show to other people. That might be fun. And this show will be up in the archives now forever. So once again, thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you next time. Live long and prosper.